Which celebrity is not as nice as they seem? Given how he was perceived for decades, Bill Cosby. I've heard Julia Roberts is actually supposed to be a really big itch. Not as famous as most people mentioned here, but a friend of mine told me she met Kellen Quinn, Sleeping with Sirens, at a festival and heard him say that they shouldn't allow fat people at festivals when talking to a band member. Can't prove it, but I did some research and read that a lot of fans who met him say he's an asshole, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. I've heard and read a lot of things that say Chevy Chase is extremely rude, condescending, and mean towards others, and a lot of directors don't want to work with him. He's notoriously difficult to work with but apparently great to his fans. Joel McHale told a story about walking up to a food cart and the owner flipped out about how his sister wasn't going to believe he met Chevy. Chevy asked him to call his sister and then yanked the phone out of his hand while it dialed and talked to the guy's sister for 20 minutes. Mike Myers. Seen the man fire people from set for looking at him. Ellen. I cannot go into further details, but as per someone I work with who has a lot of ties to famous people, through family, and has had 2 or 3 experiences with spending time around Ellen, doing whatever she does, etc. Not one story has been positive and a couple were even more insane than I thought would be the case. From how vivid her description was, there's no way it was made up. As she talked on her experiences one day, I could actually tell that it was very hard for her to do so. I wound up walking up to the front end of our store and happened upon the conversation that already started, so no idea what brought all of this up, but she eventually ended up bawling her eyes out. We have a giant store and she damn near sank it by creating a new, deep lake for it to sink in. Ellen was literally an actual person she looked up to highly. Her story is filled with excitement as to how it was made possible that she was able to hang out with her for even a few hours, and then immediately turned to that emotional realization that you idolized, for so fucking long, someone who is just straight up fucking terrible and whose private behavior is something you'd tell your children to actively avoid their whole lives. She mentioned, however, she wouldn't have traded learning that about her for anything. Was a fascinating day to say the least. I hear Kevin James is a dick. I always thought he would be nice. Jared Leto. My uncle is a manager of a famous alternative rock band that shall not be named due to privacy reasons. When I was hanging out with my uncle and the band members backstage when they were in town last year, everyone sort of agreed that Jared Leto is a douchebag, even to other bands. Amber Heard. Not the victim after all. I hope he takes every penny. Bill Nye by several accounts. Very full of himself. Eminem. My little brother and I once waited for him after a show, for 4 hours in the blistering cold and he just said no. Gwyneth Paltrow runs a company that deals exclusively in snake oil. Psychic energy readings, electromagnetic healing stickers, essential oils, holistic bullshit. Iron Man's wife got some explaining to do. This one is about a dead celebrity but I think it applies. My grandpa was a boxing promoter in Detroit for many years and through this he got to know Frank Sinatra some. For those who don't know, Sinatra was a huge fan of boxing, and while he liked Sinatra's music, he said that he would pay girls to scream and faint during his concerts. Kinda dishonest, but I suppose not too terrible in the grand scheme of things. Marlon Brando. People praise him for being a great actor, his involvement in the civil rights movement and him standing up for the rights of Native Americans. But from accounts of his ex-wives and lovers he was terrible. He was a known philanderer. He himself admitted that he would bring his affairs home in his first marriage whilst his wife was pregnant. All his exes have claimed that he was physically and mentally abusive to the point where he drove Rita Moreno to near suicide after forcing her to have a back alley abortion. Which he did to quite a few women according to reports. Even with the children he had, he was an absent father because he had so many of them and was always busy chasing after women. According to reports, after he learned his daughter Cheyenne was mentally ill, he stopped visiting her and wouldn't allow her to visit him. And obviously that infamous scene in Last Tango in Paris. Oddly enough, I've met Marilyn Manson in passing and found him to be refreshingly human and gentlemanlike. This one is more categorical, but I have dealt with many professional athletes. NHL players are by far the nicest, by far, followed by boxers, NFL, NBA, and the least nice were the pro baseball players. This is why the cameras always seem to find that one first baseman who laughs because the rest of the team are a bunch of entitled prima donnas. I've kinda got the opposite, in which a celebrity isn't the a-hole that society paints him to be. A few years back I met Jesse James of West Coast Customs fame and didn't realize it. I was in Reno for the annual air show and was staying at the Hilton. Sat at the bar in the lobby and struck up a conversation with the gentleman next to me for about 20 minutes. He told about how he was in town for a motorcycle show and offered me 2 tickets to the show. I had to decline because I had to travel to my next air show before the motorcycle show started. So instead he bought me a shot and went about his day. I just assumed he was a promoter or a fellow vendor. The next day while working at the air show, the same man comes up to my tent and says that he's sorry that I couldn't make it to his bike show and gave me a West Coast Customs hoodie. Again, we chatted for a bit. I thanked him for the hoodie and shook his hand. He then went to enjoy the air show. A few months later, I read a headline on TV about Sandra Bullock's husband cheating on her and whose face shows up? Yep. That same cool-ass dude I met just a few months prior was now apparently public enemy number 1. I didn't care though. He was cool to me and that's the way I'm always gonna see him. Flying Lotus. I saw him at a grocery store in Los Angeles. I told him how cool it was to meet him in person, but I didn't want to be a douche and bother him and ask him for photos or anything. He said, "Oh, like you are doing now?" I was taken aback, and all I could say was huh? But he kept cutting me off and going huh? 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 And closing his hand shut in front of my face. I walked away and continued with my shopping, and I heard him chuckle as I walked off. When I came to pay for my stuff up front I saw him trying to walk out the doors with like 15 Milky Ways in his hands without paying. The girl at the counter was very nice about it and professional, and was like, "Sir, you need to pay for those first." At first he kept pretending to be tired and not hear her, but eventually turned back around and brought them to the counter. When she took one of the bars and started scanning it multiple times, he stopped her and told her to scan them each individually to prevent any electrical interference, and then turned around and winked at me. I don't even think that's a word. After she scanned each bar and put them in a bag and started to say the price, he kept interrupting her by yawning really loudly. I haven't met many. Sports. Andrew Benintendi, rookie year, didn't say a word when I bumped into him. Pablo Sandoval was really nice. Very minor celebs. I met most of the whitest kids you know guys and they were all super cool. We were just shooting the breeze like we were all buds. Political. Bernie didn't say much, just kept walking. Andrew Yang stopped me at a meet and greet to continue our conversation but I had to go. I mentioned to him 2021 is the start of the next decade and he later tweeted about it and decided to take the stance that 2020 is the start of the decade. What a jerk. Trump, and he seems like a cunt to begin with. I met Keanu Reeves at a clothing store I managed. He was using their clothes for a small movie he was filming in Brooklyn. I rung him up for a backpack and shirt. Very nice person. Made very little small talk since he had to leave, but when I told him how much I loved Bill and Ted he made sure to acknowledge me in the nicest way. I never perceived him that way, but the general population seems to think Tom Hanks is a nice person. I have a hunch he isn't. The other popular nice guy celebrity Keanu Reeves seems like a genuine person. Bill Gates, though the majority of Reddit isn't aware of what a massive toolbag he was in the 90s. He's still that same person, except now he gives away a few more pennies, proportionally less than many other people, promises to give more later, and gives great TED Talks. All it takes is for a staged shot of him waiting in line for a hot dog like a normal person for social media to start slobbering over him. Though, I'm sure his PR firm coordinates most of it.